This video is going to show you how the great Scott Henderson uses the diminished scale to create some really beautiful outside sounds over a static minor seventh chord progression. I'll not only show you what to play, but I'll also give you some strategies to make it sound musical. Now, if you're like many of the guitarists that I've taught over the years, a really common issue that crops up time and again is feeling like your playing is stuck in a bit of a musical wasteland, often repeating the same ideas, and quite frankly, you're getting a bit bored with some of the lines that you're playing. Now, a great way to prevent your ideas from flatlining when you're improvising over a static chord progression is to play something the listener isn't expecting. So some outside notes that jar against the chords can create some really nice tension. In all of the examples, we'll be doing just this and exploring the sound of the A diminished scale over a static A minor 7 backing. My name's Steve Allsworth, let's dive in. Back in 1988, long before the internet and streaming, Scott introduced his instructional video, Jazz Fusion Improvisation, on VHS. Now, this was groundbreaking at the time, and I'd still regard this as one of the finest instructional videos that's out there. Now, this has since been repackaged into the DVD Jazz Rock Mastery, and I've left some links down below. This included his harmonic rules for improvising, where he laid out all of his scales, arpeggios, triads and modes over literally any chord type. Now, as you work your way down through the list, Scott introduces more outside sounds, and this is where you'll find the whole half diminished scale as a possibility over a minor seventh chord. Now, this isn't something that you typically expect to hear over a minor seventh chord. In fact, if you look in most theory manuals, it says that you'd only expect to hear a whole half diminished scale over a diminished seventh chord. So why the diminished scale? Well, one of the ways that we can view this is as a variation of the Dorian scale, which is a common choice over a static minor 7 vamp. This is because there are a lot of common notes, but we also have some tense outside notes, the flat 5, sharp 5 and major 7th. Now, you'll notice that there are some of those pesky enharmonic notes in there. We're more likely to view an F on the fingerboard rather than an E sharp, for example. Now, don't worry too much about the scale spelling at this stage. More important is that you really dig into how the intervals sound over the underlying chord. Now, Scott professes to be a blues player at heart, but with jazzy outside leanings. So you'd often find his outside lines resolving back to more of an inside blues idea. So the trick here is trying to visualize a combination of scales. If we start with A Dorian, and then we include the trusty A blues scale, but then we combine them together, we get this hybrid scale. Now, inside of this scale, we've got this pattern here on the 3rd string at the 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret and 8th fret. Now, this little pattern is something that we're going to see all over the fretboard when we start exploring the diminished scale. Now, all we're doing is making a slight adjustment to this hybrid scale to get our A diminished scale. So instead of the perfect 5th, the E, we've got a sharp 5. You can also think of that as a flat 6 or a flat 13. And instead of the flattened 7th there, the G, we've got a G sharp, which is the major 7th. Notice how the fingers swap from 1, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 4 as we go through each of the strings. Now, ultimately, getting away from these linear scale patterns is going to give you a lot more musical freedom. In the next example, we're going to be covering the whole of the fretboard using the tone, semitone, scale pattern of the diminished scale, but using an interval of a 6th. On the 1st and 3rd strings from A, it goes like so. And we can also do the same thing on the second and fourth strings using the same pattern, but a semitone lower, like so. Now these sixths lend themselves particularly well to bluesy slides. Here we're using hybrid picking, so we're using the middle finger of the picking hand to play the upper string, but we can also bring in the whammy bar with the little finger, and this will give us a really nice bit of vibrato. And this is something that Scott Henderson and players like Mike Landau are really fond of doing. At this point, I'd just like to say, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. A technique that Scott likes to use a lot is string skipping to outline the sound of a diminished arpeggio. If you take a standard A diminished 7th arpeggio, like so, but we skip that second string, you'll end up with this nice octave pattern. Now, because it's a diminished scale, we can repeat this 3 frets apart all over the fretboard. But this does sound like an endless stream of arpeggios, so it is a bit mechanical. A much more interesting pattern, and one that Scott likes to use, is where we're focusing on the same shape, but where they're 1 fret apart. So we've got one here, for example, at the 4th and 5th positions. And you'll see the same 2 fret shape repeated all over the fretboard. Now, I'd recommend that you spend plenty of time just focusing on one area of the fretboard and really thinking about all the different permutations that we can get across those 2 strings. Now, of course, we've also got this same pattern on the 2nd and 4th strings. And so on. So we can start to think about combining those 4 strings. So here's a nice little exercise to get your hand really nice and mobile across the fretboard. Once you get more comfortable with this concept, then you can start shifting around the fretboard, more akin to what Scott does when he's soloing. One of the best ways to tap into the diminished sound is by using some of the internal structures that are inbuilt within the scale. Now, inside of our A diminished scale, we've got 4 major triads: B major, D major, F major, and A flat major. All these triads contain some colourful notes from the diminished scale. Now you'll notice that each of them has got a slightly different sound over our root note. So with the F, with the D, with the B, and then the most angular and outside of the lot, the A flat or G sharp. To really get the most out of this, it's super useful to know your inversions. So here's a little exercise that will help you visualize your root position, first and second inversion triads across the second, third and fourth strings. It goes like so. If you've got this far, congratulations. But you'll also know that it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of exploring the outside sounds that the diminished scale can offer. Hopefully I've given you some useful strategies for practicing and improvising with this scale. Be sure to check the notification bell to keep up to date with my future content, and happy practicing.